Hello, I will now move on to the second question, which is 12 marks. So for this 12 marks question, they will give you the factor. Okay, just like your practice, they will give you the factor, right? In this case, it's Stalin's fear of the Western powers. Now you make sure that when you look at your main factor, you do not go off point. In this case, the keyword here is about fear. So you must write what he was afraid of. And one of these things can be, of course, the military strength of the USA. Okay, so where is this military strength? That's when you will elaborate. So you can start off with the main factor, okay, which is Stalin's fear of the Western powers. Alternatively, you can just give me the alternative factor. If let's say you find it challenging to write about the main factor first, then you can give me your alternative factor first, because that will be another paragraph, right? So your alternative factor is what is the factor that led to the outbreak of the Cold War, which is the outcome, the final outcome that they want you to write about. So I would say another one would be ideological conflict. Okay, so your full statement will be ideological conflict, right, led to the outbreak of the Cold War. So you must, when you explain, right, you must lead to the final outcome, which is the outbreak of the Cold War as listed down in the question. So these keywords must be written down. Okay, bipolarity. Right, when you look at this final outcome, you must write the keywords. What keywords? Whatever that you write must lead to tensions, must lead to conflicts, must lead to blocks, competing blocks, influence, spheres of influence, and of course the keyword of bipolarity. The whole point of this Cold War is leading to bipolarity, tensions, conflict, and competing blocks of influences, right? You have two opposing sides. That is the whole nature of the Cold War, of the outbreak of the Cold War. So when you explain, make sure that your final outcome links to these things over here that you see here. Alright, so let's move on. First main factor is, of course, your fear of the Western powers. So how are you going to write your details for this thing? Okay, so main factor, Stalin's fear of the Western powers. First, again, like the previous question, right? Ask the why of the why. Alright, this thing, Stalin's fear, led to outbreak of the Cold War. So you ask the why. Why did he fear the Western powers? Then you think about the sub reason. So he feared many reasons. One of it is the atomic bomb. So if you're going to write atomic bomb, okay, give me some details about this atomic bomb by saying, firstly, what is it? What is it? It consists, it was made due to the Manhattan Project, started way back 1942. Why is it a concern? Then ask the why again. Ask the why to your why. Why is the atomic bomb a concern? Okay, because according to Stalin, right, the USA did not reveal this weapon until they have successfully tested it out. Alright, as such, it arose a lot of suspicion among Stalin and the Soviet Union that one day, since they didn't reveal it until it was tested successfully on Japan, alright, one day they might use it on the Soviet Union. Okay, that is the big concern of this atomic bomb. Alright, so you have clearly gave me your details for why Stalin actually feared the Western powers. Next thing you write about why Stalin feared the Western powers is because, very basically, the USA was unscathed in the war, right? They were far away, most of their land were not destroyed. Okay, so their industries are still alive and kicking and still making money and still producing a lot of military grade equipment and goods, and people are indeed still trading with the USA. So hence, you can see they are still powerful. They are still powerful militarily and economy-wise after World War II. So this is a big concern for Stalin, right? In that the West are still powerful, a big force to be reckoned with. All right. Not only that, but these Western powers they also had previous invasions. Okay, previous invasions by Western powers. which led to Stalin being very concerned about the security of the Soviet Union if they invaded before and they took part in the Russian Civil War as well, right? Stalin knew that one day they might again choose to attack the Soviet Union. So this is where the fear comes about, right, of his Western powers. All right. So it's largely these three things: the strength of the USA, and the fact that they were unscathed because of the war, previous invasion by the Western powers, and of course the big one is the atomic bomb. So three clear details, three clear reasons to tell you why Stalin actually feared the Western power. But have you finished the question? No, you have not, because the next part is you must link it to the final outcome that they want you to link to, which is the outbreak of the Cold War. So you must tell me, after you've written all these things about Stalin's fear, how did it lead to the Cold War itself? Alright, the fear must lead to actions. What actions did the fear actually lead to? Well, the fear led to the action of Stalin creating satellite states, right? His salami tactics, satellite states in Eastern Europe, right? All the way in Eastern Europe in order to create a buffer zone in order to protect the safety of the Soviet Union. Okay? So, subsequently, this will have a direct impact again, all right? So again, going back to the start, how did Stalin's fear actually lead to the Cold War? Because due to this fear, he started creating satellite states. Alright, and due to the satellite states, there is a direct impact. Okay, and that direct impact is the USA will start to misinterpret these satellite states as not a defensive measure but an aggressive measure out to fight for global expansion of communism. Alright, so it is not defensive. The USA will think that these satellite states are not defensive, but actually an aggressive measure by the communists who are out to gain global expansion. And then after this, you have subsequent impact. Subsequent impact of the US thinking this way is that they will start to do something in order to stop Stalin from further expanding his Soviet influence. And what did they do? They did the containment policy, which includes Marshall Plan and the Truman Doctrine, to provide financial aid to the different countries inside of Europe. That's not the end yet, because the final impact, you must link it again, like what I say, to these things: tensions, bipolarity, competing blocks of influence. So have you done that? Okay, in a way you have, because when you end a containment policy, then that is when you start to see the change in Europe from just a Europe to two competing powerful influencers trying to get inside Europe and gain as much influence as possible. All right, with the satellite states on one hand and then your containment policy on the other hand. As such, when you have these two competing influences, that's when your tensions will start to rise. That's when your countries in Europe will start to choose sides. That's when you will start to have suspicion of one another. And when you have different sides, right, competing spheres of influences, let me write that down again. When you have competing sides of competing spheres of influences, okay, that is when you will start to see your bipolarity. And bipolarity is the key idea of the Cold War. So from here, I have finally explained. All right, back to my key question over here, which is the outbreak of the Cold War. So yes, I have successfully explained how Stalin's fear of the Western powers directly led to the outbreak of the Cold War. So you see, when you write an essay, every single line that you wrote must be intentional. Must be intentional. You cannot just give me details that are loose and do not connect anywhere. Everything you write down must connect and lead to the final outcome of what the question is asking for, which is the outbreak of the Cold War. Okay? So just a quick one for your alternative factor. That's when you write your second paragraph. Alright. Instead of Stalin's fear, now you can write anything under the sun. So just choose one that you have already memorized well. Okay, one that I already know very well is of course the ideological conflict. So the ideological conflict is the thing that led to the Cold War. Again, you must explain it that on how it led to the Cold War. So what do you write after that? Basically everything, you start with the background information first. Okay, where did this conflict come about and what is the conflict, right? What is it? The background. So again, you have it is different political and economic systems of capitalism and communism. After this, then you write what are they? What do they consist of? Okay, well, capitalism, you have free market freedom, you have ownership of profits, private ownership. You have this idea of private ownership, then you have profits, and politically you have voting rights. You have different parties, right? Allowance of different political parties. Okay, so you can vote for your leaders. Whereas on the opposite end of the spectrum, you have communism, whereas you cannot vote for your leaders. There's only one communist party, all others are banned. So in a sense, there's no freedom, right? And then for the economy wise, it's a command economy, meaning everything will flow from the Soviet Union, and the Soviet Union will decide how they want to spend money to help the rest of the blocks, the countries inside the Soviet Union. All right, so it's a command economy, okay, where everything by theory is that everybody will be equal, right? Equality for all, okay, as a means of production. Okay, so all production is not private owned. Okay, most of the production are not private owned. They will be controlled by the government. So the government will control all the major industries, and then it will allocate the different resources, different funds to the different parts of the Soviet Union, creating a command economy. So in this sense, again, there's no freedom, right? There's limited freedom. Much of the things is being controlled by the central government, who are the Communist Party. But then again, you will get your equality because they will decide what to give to each and every person. All right, so it's not a meritocracy, it's more of equality. Okay, so there lies the conflict, right? Do we go towards capitalism or do we go towards communism? Okay, next thing, after you have detailed, tell me the difference between both. You tell me the direct conflict that happened in history, which the main one is of course your Russian Civil War, where the whites, the anti-communists, together with Western influences, yes, the Western did play a part in this Russian Civil War. They actually fought the communists when the communists were about to turn, when the country was in a civil war and fighting between the communists and the capitalist systems. All right. So that's not the end yet, because once you tell me the difference between the two, you have to elaborate more on how did this difference actually lead to the Cold War. Again, the Cold War is your final outcome. Bipolarity is your final outcome. Tension, suspicion, competing bloc spheres of influence is your final outcome. So you must tell me how it went there. How do you get there? Okay, first again, write the direct impact. Direct impact of this conflict is that both sides will start to view one another as threats. Alright, because they have differing political and economic interests. The more communist countries they are, the more they can trade with one another, right? And help each other grow. But the more capitalist countries there are, then the more the capitalist countries can trade with one another and help each other to grow. Okay, so they both need more countries on their side in order to grow their respective systems. Okay, so as such, they will have measures. So what are these measures? Okay, so you go from the direct impact, which is they start to view each other as threats. So here's a view, right? They start to view each other as threats, to your subsequent impact, which is the actions. Okay, subsequent impact will be the actions taken by both. Okay, starting with the Soviet Union first, it is the satellite states in order to consolidate their power, right? Create a satellite states in order to consolidate their power. And what is the subsequent impact again? What is the countermeasure done by the USA? It is the containment policy, because they start to be suspicious, right? Just like the previous point, they start to grow in suspicion, and through this suspicion, you will see their action, the counter action of containment policy, Marshall Plan, and Truman Doctrine. And as such, now you have two different actions taking place, creating blocks of power, spheres of influence, and of course bipolarity, where different countries start to choose sides. So you start to have a capitalist and a communist blocks of countries. All right, and that is when you see tension and suspicion arising. So now the world is split into two, capitalist and communist. And yes, that is in a nutshell the explanation of the Cold War, of what the Cold War looks like. So your final outcome, okay, like I say, must lead to these tensions thing. So did you do it? Yes, I did. My final impact. Okay, so there's a flow to your essay. All right, think about your main point first. Okay, write about the background, the main point. What is it? How is it formed? Okay, why it happened? Ask the why of the why. All right, then write down all these things. After that, when you finish your elaboration, then clearly write down how exactly this thing actually led to the Cold War. Okay, then you must know the definition of Cold War is two competing sides of influence and bipolarity. So how does all these things lead to bipolarity? Okay, then you talk about impact. Impact of these two things, view each other as threats. View each other as threats. Subsequent impact, both sides start to take action against one another to protect their interests. Communist side, satellite states. USA side, Marshall Plan, Truman Doctrine, containment policy, which help build different competing blocks. Alright, and when you have different blocks, you have tensions and suspicion. That brings me to the end of my video. I hope that you have learned something. Okay, all the best.